with Jenny Critchlow.
Hello everybody and welcome to your Monday morning podcast with me, Jenny Critchlow. Apologies for last week's missed one. I lost my voice. I know, wow, because it's not used that often, I hear you say, don't I? My husband had a great time. He had a really peaceful weekend. It was a good experiment in staying silent. We're not on retreat. Anyway, voice is back, as you can hear, little deep, sound a bit like Barry White. Perhaps I should record an album. Anyway, we have been milking the theme of fear for quite a few weeks, and I did think today, should we do a fourth? But I'm wondering whether I might sink you all into the depths of fear for the rest of this podcast life. So I really think we should look at moving from fear. What does that look like, and how does it feel? And really, it's this podcast recording anyway, has fallen on a really interesting day because it's the launch of a new project of mine, and a project that I have an enormous amount of fear about or looking forward to. And therefore, it might be interesting to explore this and what's going on. So the project, in a nutshell, is called Sit With Me. And the idea is to take a meditation space into really busy places like a shopping mall. That was the vision anyway, was sitting in a shopping mall when it came through. And so this afternoon, I am going to the big shopping mall, which is about half an hour from where I live, and going pretty much into the centre of it, and setting up my meditation stool and cushions, putting some chairs out and some meditation cushions, and in a rather lonesome and friendless way, sitting down for 2 hours and meditating, which, if you can try and put yourself in that position, for me feels enormous. I think if someone else was doing it, I've had a lot of support over it and a lot of interest, which has been good. But if someone else was doing it, I would just think, wow, good idea. I'll go and join in. That would be fabulous. Of course, I'll sit with you. But it's me. And I'm nervous and scared. And don't get me wrong, if I really sit in the centre that is my heart, the energy centre, if you like, that's my heart, all my heart wants to do is sit there. It feels, when the vision of this project came in November, it was in a place of such profound awareness that the image was so clear. And I was doing a very specific thing called Breakthrough Zen Retreat. And I knew in that moment, because I'd done these before, is that no matter how amazing this vision was, come Monday when I'm back in the normal run of my life, I won't feel this way. I'll remember it, but I won't feel this way. So I went and made myself tell the monk that was holding the space for this retreat about it. And eventually, when we were allowed to speak again, told a friend of mine at the retreat, so that I knew that I would have to then go and do it. And as I knew what would happen, or maybe I made that happen, the following week when I was home and in my normal run of things, just the thought, remember our thoughts are mad, the thought of going into this busy shopping mall and sitting on my own, meditating in the middle of it, brought up such abject fear. Honestly, could have vomited just a little. Maybe I did. TMI. It brought up, wow, so many feelings of vulnerability, shame, exposure. And yet, if I visit that space, if I remember that space where the vision came in, if I really put my attention onto my heart centre, all my heart wants to do is go into that mall and sit there. It knows no other peace than that. And yet my thoughts around it create so much fear. So I had to really look at that. What is this fear of? And all the things we've been talking about over the last few weeks came in. The fear of being judged, the fear of being seen, the fear of being ridiculed, the fear of not being taken seriously, anything that bursts that bubble of persona that I've been trying to grow since I was little. And the fear of that exposure of the very vulnerable person, which I feel I am, underneath, still trying to grow. And that there's been many times over the last 20 years where I felt, especially working in this field, which invites a lot of ridicule and judgment, regardless of anyone's experience or knowledge of it, is that vulnerability feels so delicate, and that my thoughts go to past experiences, very real past experiences, of people ridiculing what I was doing or where I was with things, or my thoughts about things, if you like. Sometimes in a very obvious and very difficult way to deal with. And I realised that not only was I still thinking thoughts about that and bringing that past into the present, but I was using all of those things as a reason to try and wriggle out of what I was going to be doing. To the point, in my perception and experience, that I ended up losing my voice and not being very well. And I do sometimes wonder whether that was my subconscious way of trying to get out of this thing I'm doing this afternoon. I don't know. Either way, I'm going to do it. And when I go into, I'm just going to do it. There's part of me that's relief. And the other part of me tries to go into logic, which is, what is the worst that can happen? And I'm sure you can all answer that, because we've been going through this together for the last 3 weeks over fear. Is the worst that can happen is I can feel bad. You know, I might feel small, I might feel embarrassed. I might sit there and nobody join me at all. I might sit there and it might be a great success, whatever success is, and lots of people join, who knows? But if I don't do it, what then? If I don't do this thing that my heart really wants to do, what then? And it brings me back. Do you remember the podcast last where we mentioned about, if you're given a year to live, what would you do? Not really, because we don't really know what we'd do, but we tend to then say, well, I would go and sit in a mall and meditate and I wouldn't mind. Is that I have to do these things now. There is no other way. There's no other choice. It's ridiculous for me to think in 10 years' time I'll do it, because everything will be different in 10 years' time and I will feel better in 10 years' time and therefore I will do this project. That's crackers. If I want the life I say I want, if I want the changes that I say I want in this life, if I want to embrace all the amazing things that can happen for me and I can be part of in this life, it begins with me stepping into the abyss and risking my own vulnerability, my own shame, risking being criticised and called names and all the things that's happened to all of us over the years. All of that is this risk. And all I know is, if I don't do it, then something else will come in that I have to face to do that. Or I stay where I am and stagnate. What would I rather do? And I think that's where I turn this over to you for this podcast, is, what do you talk a lot about doing? What do you think a lot about maybe doing one day in the future? Have a look at it. You know, what obstacles do we put in our place in order not to be able to do it? The kids aren't old enough. We haven't had kids yet. We're not married yet. I met the right person. Don't want to be where I am. What happens to the house? What happens to the pets? What fill in the blanks here. What stories do we tell that we want to, about things we want to do, accomplish, or experience? And what counter stories do we give ourselves so that we don't have to do them? And when we put those counter stories in place, how far off are they? If it's the kids leaving home and it's 15 years, then does that give you a great respite for 15 years? And what happens in 15 years? Because that's not that long. What happens if there isn't 15 years? So my invitation to you is to look at what you talk about doing a lot. Find your counter story and really question whether that counter story is simply hiding you behind the curtain of your life. Cringing behind the curtain, not wanting to come out until you know that it's going to be safe. And you can never come out and know it's going to be safe, because you have to come out first. And then you have to find out whether it was safe or not. What is it that moves your heart? What is it that you yearn for? What is it you tell yourself is impossible? And consider when you tell yourself you can't do it for whatever reason, just consider that those reasons may be wrong. And open yourself up to the exhilaration of fear, to the exhilaration of vulnerability, and the chance that it all may work out in a way that you never knew or dreamed possible. So by the time you're listening to this will be Monday morning, and I'll have done my first Sit With Me. The next one will be next Friday, the 7th of February in Touchwood Shopping Centre, 12 till 2 near the Apple Store if any of you live locally. And I'll let you know how it went. And let me know how your fear story's going. It's been lovely to chat, as always. I'll see you next Monday.